Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Abiy Ahmed. I'm going to present my PhD proposal entitled with Social Capital and its role in traditional conflict resolution in Ethiopia, where the case interreligious conflict in Jimma. Since I'm going to use the term social capital in many of my slides, I would prefer to start defining the concept of social capital first. Even though the concept of social capital is emerging as important element for social cohesion and social computing, but it doesn't have single definition. Rather, it's packed with different concepts and definitions that makes it difficult to simplify, classify, and analyze it. Some of the definitions are complementary, while the others are contradictory. And this critical limitation in conceptual and ontological status in defining social capital resulted in weakness in theoretical and empirical studies. Even though this fluidity has got its own downside on defining the concept, but there are several definitions in literatures. The major definitions are a social network, mutual acquaintance, and social recognition. Social structures that facilitate individuals' actions within the social structure. Molds the quality and the quantity of social interaction and strengthen communal interaction. All the above definition and other related definitions focus on network of social connections, while the definition by Putnam includes an additional dimension about how social capital plays a vital role to enhance a better achievement in socio-economic outcomes. And his definitions are the most relevant definition to my study context. After we see briefly the definition, it's better to compare and contrast the concept of social capital with other well-known concepts. For that, we will see the nexus between social capital and development. Traditionally, the constituents of capital were known by natural, physical, political, and human capital. But in recent years, social capital is included as important ingredient for economic development. The reason behind this, the visibility of this intangible capital is more visible between countries and even between regions of the same country, can result in different level of economic development. We can take Italy as an example. Northern part of Italy exercised the horizontal social capital, while the southern part practiced the vertical social capital. Due to the better endowment of horizontal social capital as opposed to the hierarchical one, the quality life in north is much better than the south. This comparison also serves to compare with conflict. Conflict can affect both tangible and intangible capitals. If you see, as an example, the civil war in Korea, the war between North and South Korea, was devastating for that nation in many ways. But for Japan, it was a great opportunity for their rebirth of their economy. Likewise, conflict affects social capital both positively and negatively. In the case of interstate conflict, which strengthens social cohesion, that in turn create a positive social capital. We can take as an example Ethio-Italy war. During this war, it doesn't mean there was no any local issues, local agendas, but when the invader tries to attack the nation, the social capital plays on mobilizing national resources, communal thoughts, and prioritizing the agenda on defending their territory from the invaders. In this specific case, the conflict plays on enhancing social capital. On contrary, if you see intrastate conflict, which weakens social cohesion to further perpetuate a violent conflict. We can take Cambodia as an example. Cambodians' political elite were ambitiously dreamed to recreate Cambodia in a way that starting life from zero, sending the doctors to village to start life from agriculture, which erodes the social capital of that nation and decay the social cohesion of among different groups. In intrastate conflict, we can see how social capital destroyed. So intrastate conflict may play a positive role for social capital. On contrary, intrastate conflict plays in a very negative way. Not only conflict has an effect on social capital, but social capital also has both positive and negative effect on conflict. If we see as an example, bonding social capital can be perverted for individual or group gains and generates exclusionary forces to breed further conflict. We can take what had happened in Rwanda. Both Hutu and Tutsi appreciate their group's value while they lose tolerance among different groups, which led them to a very devastating conflict in that nation. On contrary, bridging social capital minimizes the detrimental effect of bonding social capital. We can see as an example Equb or Iddur, the smallest institution in Ethiopia. In Equb or Iddur, there might be different religious groups, different tribes together. In this specific case, that Equb serves as a glue on bringing different groups together. And that forum gives them to air out if there is any grievances. And that airing out grievances also serve on averting conflict. And also build a cognitive one on trust, values, and norms. So social capital has both a positive and negative effect on conflict, like the conflict has both a positive and negative effect. Conflict resolution mechanism can be done. Both formal and informal institutions are useful to club complex societal conflict. But the formal one lacks mechanism to revive eroded social value and traditional deeply divided social groups and rebuild social psychology. We can take as an example a Borna-Garri conflict. Most of the time, the formal institution jeopardize long-term peace-building process and lose to understand the root cause of the conflict, while the informal one plays a very great role on resolving the conflict, and also it heals physical, psychological, and emotional trauma developed after conflict. Not only that, the informal institution also facilitate regeneration of broken social fabrics through reconciliation, addresses the root cause of the conflict. We can also see several examples both from Africa and Ethiopia. If we take Gacaca of Rwanda, which is an informal institution and plays a great role in Rwanda's civil war. Also, Ubuntu of South Africa is playing an amazing role on supporting or filling the gap of the formal institutions. So, those informal institutions in Africa, more specifically in Ethiopia, are very vital on conflict management, also conflict aversion.
ይቅር እንደተባባላችሁ ሁሉ ይቅር ይበላችሁ። ያለፈውን ክፉ ሁሉ በመልካምና በፍቅር ሽሮ አዋህዶ ያኑራችሁ። ከሚያሳስት፣ ከሚያጣላ፣ ከሚያጋጭና ደም ከሚያፋስስ ክፉ ሁሉ ይጠብቃችሁ። አሜን።
In our historical context in Ethiopia, the creation of modern Ethiopia marked by power struggle and a conflict among different cleavages, including devastating religious violent conflict. Even though most of the religious conflict in the past were result of leaders, those who consider an instrument for their legitimacy. We can see few examples. In 4th century, there was a conflict between Christianity and traditional religions. Not only the Beja rebellion, but also the Judaism were involved in this specific conflict, and Judaism, the followers of Judaism were sent or derived to the inaccessible mountains of the north during this war. Also, in 10th century, another notable history were registered in Ethiopia between Christianity and Judaism, were led by Yorit Gudit. Another notable phenomena of conflict were led by Ahmed between Muslim and Christian. The Muslim from the east were attacking the central and highlander of Christians. Also, another phenomena were happened in 18th century during Emperor Johannes, right after Boromeda Council around Wollo region between Muslim and Christian. This all conflicts were left deep scare and a fear in our society. Also, this all conflicts were not purely religious conflict. There was visible involvement of the political leaders for their own benefits. But even though this all conflicts left deep scare in our society, but there are amazing a positive social tie. So despite long rivalry between Christianity and Islam, there are areas where minority Muslim lives in harmony with majority Christians and vice versa. We can see as an example minority Muslim in Sidama and Gurage, while minority Christians in Hararge. Not only minority lives in a majority area, but also Ethiopia is known to build marriage between Muslim and Christian. We can take as an example my mom and dad. My dad is Muslim and my mom is Christian. They live together for 50 years and they have 9 children in common. This tells to build the smallest institution called family in Ethiopia were not a problem to marry different religion or Muslim with Christian. This great tie, this wonderful tie is gradually pressurized with external factors. Both indigenous Islam and Christianity have increasingly become vulnerable to external pressure, notably from Middle East and the West respectively. This external pressure is using a digital age to induct virtually the fundamental school of thought. Also fundamental thinking is inducted to the youngsters through virtual communication. Not only the external pressure, but also there is a competing narratives. Darajah noticed the divergent narratives by different religious groups. Orthodox Christianity narrate this nation as chosen nation and land of Solomon in the Ark, while Protestant Christianity defined it as a land of reform. Also Muslim narrate it as a land of the first hijrah. This competition in narratives may lead to conflict. So this is a time bomb, and a potential source of conflict needs to be analyzed and managed well. From all this historical background, this investigation focuses on a local violent religious conflict that occurred from September 2006 in a village outside the southwestern city of Jimma. So my problem statement focuses on this specific incident, and this specific incident flared when Maska celebration bonfire of the Ethiopian Orthodox Christian ceremony sparked a conflict with neighboring Muslim in a mosque and resulted in human casualty, destruction of property, lasting psychological trauma, religious division and destruction of social fabric and pre-existing harmony. The current knowledge gap on this specific issue is post-1991 conflict studies either focused on the thesis of resource-based or ethnic identity conflict mainly. The reason for this might be the regime change. And as you all remember, in 1991, the current government when took place, the ethnic issue became a priority and constitutionally recognized issue. So most of the scholars were focusing to study about this issue. But this thesis, however, suffer from oversimplification and they tend to echoing the immediate cause of the conflict. Even though there were a comprehensive study about religious conflict in Ethiopia, including the case of Jimma provided by Darajah, even though his main focus was on the actual and historical phenomena. However, my study focused on social capital, post-conflict social capital building traditional conflict resolution mechanism. Also, we do have different methodology. Most of the study were conducted by qualitative methodology, while I'm using both qualitative and quantitative methodology so as to get the deeper level of the conflict. And with the increase in the incidence of intelligence conflicts in different parts of country and hidden tension among different religious groups, this study will attempt to investigate cultural, historical, and political factors to identify the root cause of the conflict based on social capital perspective. We'll try to examine and assess the role of traditional conflict resolution institution in post-conflict situations. Also, a case in point is that religious forum for peace in averting and resolving conflict and replenishing eroded social capital in that specific area. So we'll try to see what this religious forum and why it established right after the conflict, and after the establishment, what's the practical outcomes registered by this informal institution. If there is any positive outcomes, how we can scale it up and scale it fast for the use of national level. I do have objectives, both general and specific, and my general objective is to investigate the nexus between social capital and conflict, also to examine the role of social capital in conflict resolution in Jimma zone of Ethiopia. On cascading the general objective into the specific one, I do have 4 specific objectives. The first one is to describe the evolution of social capital over time, the affected communities. Second, to identify the underlying source of violent religious conflict in the study area. Third, to assess the nature of interplay between social capital and conflict in the Christian and Muslim communities in Jimma zone. The fourth one is to explore the perception of Jimma zone communities on the vitality of social capital and the religious forum peace. More on operationalizing these specific objectives, I do have 4 research questions. And the first one is, how did the social capital that existed across different ethnic and religious groups evolve over time in Jimma zone, where the violent conflict happened? Second, what are the historical, political, and cultural contexts that triggered the violent conflict in the zone? Third, what are the features of interaction between social capital and conflict in the Christian and Muslim community in Jimma zone? The fourth one is, how do inhabitants of Jimma zone perceive the role of social capital in maintaining harmony and the role of traditional institution, which is Religious Forum for Peace, in helping and to avert and resolve conflict? The theoretical framework, I've gone through several readings and literatures, and I've focused on 6 theories. And the first one is rational theory, which understands social capital is an informational resource emerging from the interaction between rational agents and needing to coordinate for mutual benefits. As you all aware, social capital has got 3 major pillars: the resource, the topology, and type of communication. But this rational theory focuses only on the resource part. The second one is trust theory. Fukuyama understood the social capital as a trust with the society, as single most important strand of the conceptualization of social capital, which is a very important element, but he left the structural part. He focused only on the cognitive one. And the third one, which is embeddedness and autonomy, which describes social capital in a very better ground, and it tries to understand social capital both in micro level and a macro level. A micro level, which is bottom up, embeddedness is integration, and autonomy is linkage. While at macro level, which is top down, embeddedness refers to synergy and autonomy is to organizational integrity. And the fourth theory is the one Putnam adopted from Holcock for horizontal relation, which is bonding and bridging, refers to integration and linkage concept of Holcock. And the fourth one is the hierarchical or vertical relation, refers to unequal distribution of power and social structure, which Coleman understood it in a way that social capital is an equal distribution of power and social structure. The fifth one tries to classify social capital into structural and cognitive part. The structural social capital refers to network among unequal groups and also equal groups. And cognitive social capital entails trust, which Fukuyama focused, but Uphoff tried to incorporate the trust part in cognitive one. And the last and sixth theory is socio-political and economic context. In this theory, both vertical and horizontal interaction are a product of socio-political economic settings. Therefore, the most suitable conceptual framework that fits to the context of this study is the one that allows us to examine broader aspect of social capital, which is both horizontal and vertical social capital, as well the macro settings also must be included. And from this conceptual framework, I draw the analytical framework which tries to analyze micro level, meso level, and a macro level. In micro level, we'll see individual level interaction or household level interaction. In meso level, in small group level, or individual within an institution. And in the macro level, we'll see institutions conflict resolution and socio-political environments, which means we'll try to assess or to analyze the triggering point, the proximity, and structural level of problem. To understand the root cause, we must focus both on structure, proximity, and triggering point. Otherwise, it will be shallow study. So as to fill the gap of the previous studies, I want to focus from micro, meso to macro level. Before I go to my methodology, I think it's very important to describe the study area. Jimma zone has a total population of 2.5 million people, and out of this, 50% is women. When we see ethnic composition, Oromo is 87%, Amhara is 4%, and Yem is 3%, and others will cover the remaining. Religious composition also, Muslim is around 85%, Orthodox Christian is around 11%, and Protestant Christianity is around 3%. But I focus on Chago, Bashasha, Asandabo, and Challo, Kabbales, where the cost of the violent conflict were huge, and also the conflict resolution effort focused. So my focus area is these four Kabbales. In choice of method, which rooted in epistemological and ontological commitment. Most of the investigator affiliation to certain discipline gives a narrow path to the choice of methods and affect the neutrality of method choice. But for my study, for this study, we'll use mixed method from the technical perspective to meet the objectives that stated and to give a holistic picture of the study. But it doesn't mean mixed method is superior on other method. But to my context, it can give a holistic and a better understanding of the subject under the study area. So for my qualitative method, to assess the nexus among social capital, violent conflict, and traditional conflict resolution mechanism in depth, also to examine how violent group conflicts shape both social capital and traditional conflict resolution mechanisms. The tools I'm going to use for my quantitative method is focus group discussion, interviews, also network analysis or systematic observation, and triangulation of data will be there. In my quantitative method, will assess the perception of Jimma communities on the vitality of social capital in traditional conflict resolution mechanisms. Also, to identify factors that directly and indirectly affect the traditional conflict resolution mechanisms to enrich and complement the result obtainable in the qualitative data analysis. For this, I'm going to adopt a SCAT social capital assessment tool, which is a set of empirical tools for measuring social capital and developed by World Bank. It's developed for low-income settings, and the research conducted using this tool were in Peru and Vietnam. Also very helpful for my study area with little modification. And I'm going to use as a tool for my quantitative method exploratory data analysis for cross-tabulation, density function in descriptive statistics. Also, regression will be applied here. This will be used to identify and analyze focuses that hinder and enable traditional conflict resolution mechanisms. In sampling, design, and techniques, multi-stage sampling technique will be applied to select respondents, and purposive sampling for focus group discussion, I'm going to have 12 focus group discussions, 3 from each conflict area, and 8 to 12 participants in each group. But in each group, identical identical individual will be participate, like women, men, and religious leaders. I don't mix men with women or youngsters with the elders. The second one is for key informants. I'm going to use the victim family, politicians, local leaders, intellectuals, religious leaders, and religious forum for peace. And for this, I'm going to use a snowball technique. The entry point will be the known individual. Then I will chain through those known individuals to other relevant individuals so as to get a proper information through interview. To identify targets for network analysis, I'm going to use market, wedding place, funeral ceremony, mosque and church attendances, and holidays will be systematically observed. For simple random sampling detail, the survey will be implemented at the household level, and accordingly the representatives random sample size is calculated to be 768 household. I use the Watson recommended standard for rate this number. For operationalization of the variables, I do have one independent variable, which is social capital, also another dependent variable, which is traditional conflict resolution. This traditional conflict resolution is the outcome of social capital. That's why it is considered as dependent variable. But these two variables is not directly linked. There is independent variable, which is intergroup conflict. And I'm going to use a SCAT, social capital assessment tool, to analyze the independent variable. Also CAF, conflict analysis framework, to analyze the interdependent variable. Ethical consideration is there in my studies, and the consideration for the cultural, psychological, moral, and religious aspect of the study area. Also confidentiality of respondents and identify and their privacy. Also we'll try to elaborate the academic purpose of the study. And thank you very much for listening.